We have with us Mr. M.R. Shivaraman, former Revenue Secretary to the Government of India and also former Executive Director of IMF with us. Mr. M.R. Shivaraman has got a rich experience in preparing the union budgets and as well as the state government budgets. He is also responsible, or he is the main brain behind the introduction of PAN card during Dr. Manmohan Singh's finance minister's time. When the PAN card was introduced, Dr. Manmohan Singh received the first card and Mr. M.R. Shivaraman received the second card. Now we know what is the value and importance of a PAN card. He is considered as one of the experts in the budgets, union budgets as well as state budgets. Now we have with us Mr. M.R. Shivaraman. Welcome, sir.
Thank
We
you.
are greatly honored to have you
Thank you
in
very
our
much.
presence to. Sir, recently you have seen the budget. What do you feel that in spite of the COVID and other thing as a challenging time, the finance minister has presented a budget. What do you think is the positive side of the budget? Then we will go for the reviews and negatives.
The positive side of the budget is there is a recognition of the fact that a lot of activities which would potentially generate employment and also create capital for further returns have been amply recognized in the budget.
What is
Secondly, there is also a recognition of the fact that revenue receipts are likely to be modest in the coming year, maybe also in the next year. Thirdly, another point that has been recognized is that government, while it has to be on a spending spree, it has also to have resources to somehow other bridge the gap. So therefore, they are going to resort to a huge sale of what is usually called the sale of crown jewels of the country. They're going to sell the LIC, part of it at least they're going to sell. They're going to probably try and achieve it before the end of this year. Maybe they will sell a little more of it next year. They're going to sell a couple of banks. And then if you look into the details of the Finance Commission report, etc., which I happened to glance through, there may be an idea to sell a huge amount of land under the possession of the armed forces, which may be in thousands of acres, not in hundreds of acres. Similarly, the railways also have thousands of acres of land. There may be probably something brewing on this front that the government would like to sell many of this. As you know, that in some ports, which are under the government control, there is already some kind of management agreement with private sector. Like in Chennai, also some, I think Dubai port is managing some of the operations. So they want to hand over the operations to the private sector. This may again be on some kind of a lease arrangement by which the ports may get some money. So the idea is that a lot of government resources are going to get privatized. Now, that's going to take a long time. Now, you can go to the next question that I will come to a little later.
okay? Then we will go for it. Sir, what do you think are the three topmost negative aspects of the budget? Three topmost negative aspects, according to you.
The negative aspects of the budget is a very alarming situation on the interest payment side. According to the figures that are there in the budget, the government of India is likely to get 15.5 lakh crores as net tax revenue to the government from GST and the corporation taxes, out of which 8.09 lakh crores will be paid by way of interest on government securities and government borrowings. That is 52% of the entire tax revenue proposed to be collected during the year 21-22 will be transferred in the form of interest to the people who are holding GSECs. Who are the people holding the GSECs? They are corporate houses. They are mostly banks. There are mutual funds, and foreigners also now have been permitted to hold GSEC of India. So which means there is a transfer of income collected by way of taxes by the government from the mass of the people, because GST everyone pays, including a beggar in the street may be paying a GST if he's buying something, a BD or something, if he buys, he's paying some goods tax on it. So every citizen is paying somewhere or the other some form of GST. That money, part of it, that is 8.09 lakh crores, are going to in the hands of the banks, the mutual funds, and other entities who are holding GSEC. This is going to increase the inequality in incomes, because who is parking the money in the mutual funds? Who is parking the money in the banks? The companies which are rich, companies which have got huge reserves. Now, what will they do with the reserves? They are not going to speculate in the stock market. Some people do, but otherwise they are going to go for safe haven deposits, and they are naturally be GSEC or bank deposits. So this is a very alarming situation as far as I can see, that we are heading towards a debt trap.
Next, another
Another important feature of this budget is the budget, according to the Constitution, is an annual financial statement. Whereas the figures reeled out by the Honorable Finance Minister, they do not pertain to the next year. Most of them pertain to several years. If you go through her budget speech, you will see that I'm going to invest so much of money over the next 3 years, next 5 years, next 6 years. So it's actually a budget proposal for the next 3, 5, 6 years on many of the projects. Now, people were in hubris when they heard 1.03 lakh crores have been assigned to Tamil Nadu, 35,000 crores have been assigned to Assam, several thousand crores have been given to West Bengal. Now, those amounts are not going to spend tomorrow. The total amount of increase in capital outlay is just 1 lakh crores against 4 lakh crores of last year. Next year is going to be budget for 5.2 lakhs or something. That's all the increase that is taking place, not those thousands and lakhs of crores indicated by the finance minister in the budget. Actually, I have prepared 13, 14, 15 budgets. 11 of them are in the state governments and 4 of them in the central government. When a budget is prepared, it is the annual financial statement of the government. It is a balance sheet for that particular year which you are submitting it. You may indicate that I'm going to spend this much of money in the current year on an important project which have a gestation period of 6 years or 7 years. But you do not say, I'm going to spend 1.03 lakh crores on roads. Which roads? When are they going to come? How much will they be spent on next year? So that is missing in the budget, which is technically, I think, is a mistake.
next, I asked for the 3 negatives.
You want to know the third one? Third negative, for example, is the hike in customs duties. In 1991, the government took a decision that India should become a competitive economy. The infant industries protection argument ceased to exist in India from 1991 onwards. In fact, after the 94-95 budget, when the custom duties were slashed to 1/3 or even less than what they were before, which I took a grave risk. Myself and Manmohan Singh took a grave risk. We might have lost our jobs because if the whole thing had failed. But surprisingly, in spite of the slashing of duties to the extent of 60% in some cases, revenues went up. Industry was annoyed first, but then industry started picking up. And you would have noticed that during that period, productivity of labor in India also grew as much as they grew in the Western countries during their industrialization period. So now, in the name of Atmanirbhar, in the name of Swadeshi, you are trying to bring back the custom duties on many items because people have put pressure on you. What quality of product are you going to get? If you're going to impose a tax of 15%, then there is a fuel surcharge that is going to come on it. That is, this is agriculture industry surcharge which is going to come on it. Ultimately, you will find many of the products are going to carry 30%, 35% duty or 10% duty. What kind of an industry you are going to create here? They will all be smug in selling third quality products to our industry, which is the third negative feature of this budget.
Thank you, sir. Now we have with us in this small discussion group Mr. T. N. Ashok, formerly economic editor of PTI. He is joining from Delhi. Mr. Mohan, a leading chartered accountant who has been handling the industries. Professor Prabhakar is an economic professor. And also Mr. K.T. Jagannathan, formerly associate editor of the Hindu and was in charge of the economic pages. These are all the experts we have asked them. We have assembled here to have an interaction with you. And I request Susan Koshi, editor-in-chief of Presence, to take it forward. I will join in between also. Susan.
Thank you, Mr. Srinivasan, and thank you, Mr. Sivaraman, for giving us an insight. Now the floor is thrown open to the guests who have questions for Mr. Sivaraman. Please briefly just introduce yourself so that he knows whom he's addressing to. And also may your questions be brief. Who would like to pose the first question, please? Please unmute when you're asking the question.
Mohan, Chartered Accountant. Can I start?
Yes, Mr. Mohan, please go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Mohan.
Yeah. Sivaraman sir, good evening.
Good evening.
As a tax practitioner, I have a few questions. I think this year they have, last year itself, they have made two tax rates. One is for the individuals themselves. One option 1 and option 2. In fact, this even professionals are confused. I don't know a common man how he will be able to. In fact, if I remember when some time back it was proposed that the law will be, income tax law will be simplified so that a small taxpayers need not even go to a chartered accountant. So, but unfortunately now the tax rates itself too many. This year, what they have done, they have added 2 more slabs. One 60 years, one normal non-senior citizen. Second, senior citizen 60 and 80, and then 80 and above. I think when I find it is too complicated, I think we are talking about simplification. Unfortunately, I think we are going on complicating the tax structure. I think, what do you feel about it, sir?
I entirely agree with you. The first canon of taxation is certainty. And that certainty canon has been violated. And this canon has been coming from Adam Smith's days in 1740 when he wrote The Wealth of Nations. And now we are in 2020 or whatever it is, 180 years afterwards, or yeah, 280 years afterwards, we find grave uncertainties being introduced in the tax system. In fact, when I was Revenue Secretary, there was a proposal to simplify the entire tax system by having an income tax law of only 56 sections. That proposal is lying here, right inside this Almira. It was prepared by chartered accountants and former members of the tribunal. 3 or 4 of them were there. It was a beautiful law. We said that it would be a simple form of taxation. Of course, it might have rung bells in the offices of chartered accountants because they would have had less cases. But otherwise, it was a very simple law. Thereafter, one more committee was formed. And then that committee also gave a report that it will be a simple income tax law. Again, that did not go through. Then during Pranab Mukherjee's time, a complicated exercise was done, and a series of amendments was suggested by him. They were also put in abeyance. Now, thinking that they are going to simplify the income tax law, Madam Nirmala Sitharaman went ahead and said they are going to have an income tax rate devoid of exemptions. Now, if you look at, I computed my tax liability under that reduced rate, and I computed also under the rate at which I can claim exemptions. I will not go for that particular rate, which is a simple rate, because I'm going to lose money heavily. Exactly. And I wonder whether many people are going to adopt it at all. If at all she had wanted to do this, she could have straight away introduced this. No, I'm reducing tax rate, or I'm withdrawing the exemptions. Because it was politically not feasible, so they went via media, creating complications for everyone, whether to choose this or not. So I think that was a very, very big mistake they committed. They should not have given the choice if they had wanted. They should have scrapped all the exemptions and say corporate tax will be 25%. In the case of individuals also, the maximum rate will be 25%, and go ahead. Probably they didn't have the courage to do it. In fact, I'll let you out into a secret. In 1994, when I started working on the tax reforms, I had to consult a large number of chartered accountants, econometricians, economists, public, industrialists, everyone. We did a lot of exercise. And in regard to the excise duty, because at that time there was no proposal for GST, although we had started working on the VAT, I suggested 16% excise duty across the board, all the commodities. We did a lot of exercise for 2 months and we came to the conclusion. Surprisingly, after 25 years, Arvind Subramanian also came to the same conclusion. 16% is a revenue neutral rate after 25 years. So that also Mr. Manmohan Singh said, I'm scared, Shivaraman. Right. How am I going to introduce one single rate? I says flat rate for every kind of commodity, 16%. For the very essential commodities of consumption or for education, the rest of the things should be 16%. But it was not accepted. Similarly, there was a flat rate income tax movement at that particular point of time. So we had worked out what would be the flat rate income tax for India. So we said it should be 15 to 17% flat rate.
Yes, yes.
But then income tax, as you know, was considered to be a tax with progressivity in the rates, because then only it will be taking money from the rich and at the same time lower amount of money from the poor. So that was also given up. Today, the flat rate tax is in force in Russia and some of the Eastern European economies. And according to one report of the IMF, it has done well, although the progressivity is not there. I am not in favor of one single rate of income tax because that will be unfair. And the third point which I want to mention to you is that over the years, there has been a swing. Earlier, if you look at the textbooks on public finance, economists said income tax is the best tax because that distinguishes between high income earning people and low income earning people, and you can give an exemption. And a commodity tax is a regressive tax because it falls equally on the rich and the poor. But now the Western nations are moving away from income tax because of competition among the countries. So they are reducing the income tax rate and slightly increasing the value-added tax or goods and services tax. If you look at the European Union, it's between 17 and 21%. If you look at Australia, it is 17%. Only Malaysia, which introduced the goods and services tax, it went back on it because there were serious protests in the States. So they went back to the sales tax after 1.5 years of experiment.
Yes, sir. Very good observation, sir. I completely agree. I think, sir, coming to the tax rates, I think I have something.
We'll come to the second round. I think Ashok,
Yes.
we will have one question for everybody. Then we'll come for the second round. Ashok, I think you wanted to.
While we wait for Mr. Ashok, may I pose a question that is put in the chat box? This is from Miss Pooja Lakshmi, who is a law student, and she's part of the Next Gen Political Leaders group that we have under Prime Point Foundation. Her question is, will there be a report submission in due course to clarify where the amount that is being provided for the various projects? Is there a system in place for that? For example, which of the roads is repaired, or how is the budget divided? Is it the same for every state? That kind of details is.
Yeah, see, the budget is presented as demand for grants. Now, let us take the Ministry of Roads and Highways. They'll be presenting a demand for grant. But it is not necessary. I do not know. But this, I mean, I'm sorry to say, this government has been less than transparent in the presentation of all its budgets. Normally, the demand for grant of the Roads and Highways Department should show the details of all the expenditure or the amount of money that will get transferred to the National Highways Authority of India for purposes of building the roads in different states or bridges in different states. But when I went into the budget, looking at the demand for grant for roads and highways, I found that instead of 1 lakh crores of last year, in the current year, 1,18,000 crores will be given to the National Highways Authority of India. That is there, and in the speech also, Madam Nirmala Sitharaman has mentioned it. She's been transparent about the money she's transferring. But if you want to find out how much of this 1,18,000 crores is going to Haryana or to Punjab or Kerala and other things, you'll have to find out from the budget of the National Highways Authority of India. That is a problem. Usually in the state government, in the demand for grant, you will find very detailed figures of every project and every kind of activity for which money is being sought from the assembly or from the parliament. In the case of the government of India, it being a huge monstrous entity, you won't find details to that extent. But if you go to the department, you should be able to get the details.
Right, thank you, sir. The next question, Mr. Ashok, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. Sir, Mr. Shivram, sir, I would like to go into your the first negative aspect of the budget. You said about budget revenue estimates. You said that 15.5 lakh crores is the estimated revenue receipts, and then 8.09 crores will be paid out by the government for people who hold government securities. So that leaves us with about, say, 52% of the revenue income is already gone. Now, viewed against this context, as you already said that the budget is an annual exercise and not a progressive exercise for the next 2-3 years. The finance minister has made a projection. She has admitted that the fiscal deficit is about 9.5% of GDP, and then she hopes to reduce it to 6.8% of GDP in 21-22 and in 25-26 to about 4%. Now, she doesn't outlay the measures by which the fiscal deficit can be brought down, because the tax buoyancy is very less, manufacturing is not there, joblessness continues in the economy. So how do you think she arrives at these figures, and how is she actually going to reduce the fiscal deficit, which is very alarming?
If I can place myself in the position of the Revenue Secretary, what would have happened is that for the coming year, that is 21-22, they would have assumed that the economy will come back on track. When they assume that the economy will come back on track, they have also to take into account some of the reduction in duties and exemptions that they have given in the past. So taking that into account, they have projected the growth of the revenue receipts by, I think, 14% or something.
Yeah.
that they have taken. Now, that is a reasonable assumption, I would say. But if you take the GST, if the month of January it is given 1.2 lakh crores, my own estimate of GST on the basis of the GDP of India at basic cost, that is at the producer prices, it should be around 16 lakh crores. 16 lakh crores. I mean, that is my estimate. It should be 16 lakh crores. And my own feeling is there is a huge amount of deviation. Secondly, the GST Council is a monster. It's a hydra-headed monstrosity. 29 states, 29 finance ministers, 29 people with 290 kinds of wishes and horses coming there. So with that kind of a thing, to have a streamlined GST system is being very difficult, because one minister will come and say you exempt textbooks, another minister will come and say you exempt pens, another third minister will come and say you exempt the printing presses. So it's a very difficult job for the finance minister to establish a balance. Now, if you are able to reduce, see, for example, they started increasing the level at which the GST will come into force, 75 lakhs, 1 crore. And these are all used, the bills are being used for purposes of claiming input tax credit. Freely they are using that bills and other things generated by the exempted people. They buy them in the market, they go in. This was my experience when the first time when we introduced the CENVAT, that is central VAT system, was introduced in my time, which is now converted into GST.
Yes.
At the time, what happened was when you are exempted from paying the taxes, for example, I am purchasing goods from XYZ, let us say a small manufacturer, all those bills I collect, and then I will produce it as my input, and I claim the input tax credit, whereas I have not used them at all. This is a scandal which is being caught everywhere in every part of the country. Therefore, you should not have gone in for any exemption. In my opinion, no exemption at all, excepting food grains. Excepting edible item, there will be no other exemption that is given. Everyone should be taxed. Then you will find the revenue will jump up to 20 lakh crores. That is the main folly in the system here. Another point is, if you look at the income tax also, a lot of people are filing return. They are giving. Now, what is this problem in Punjab? I'm not being political, because some of you are also people who are involved with the press and all. What is the problem in Punjab? In Punjab, you will produce your accounts in such a manner, say every income has come from agriculture. Now, this is a problem which is being faced in agriculturally prosperous states like Madhya Pradesh, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Punjab, Haryana. All these states have got huge potential for producing agricultural products. Now, people will just own 5 cents of land, and they will be having other income through various other sources. Then they will say everything I produce here, therefore I'm claiming. So all that is said in the income tax law is that you show your gross income, the agriculture income only for the marginal rate of tax, but the entire income goes out of taxation. That is what is happening in this country. Now the reason is, if you tax agriculture, there will be a huge hue and cry. So, but at the same time, people are misusing it. Now you have to check what is the average productivity of rice in the country: 2.7 tons per hectare, 2.8 ton. Now it has gone to 3. Whereas people are showing 5 tons productivity per hectare, 6 ton productivity per hectare. Now, as all of you are very learned people, let me tell you, has anyone at any point of time done a proper stock taking of the food grains in the godowns of the FCI, which is now 85 million tons? I am positive at least 1 million tons will be missing. Why is it that there is so much of pressure from Punjab? Because when you take a ton of paddy at the procurement center, because I am also traveling here in the villages, so there is certain amount of moisture content which is allowed for purpose of procurement. Now they will increase that moisture content by pouring water or something like that and go. All of them are interconnected in this. The middleman is connected, middleman is the large agriculture, the middleman is the trader, the middleman is the mandi chairman, middleman is the minister, middleman is an MLA, middleman is a soldier, every damn thing is the same person. So when you go there, so you are just hoodwinking the FCI. You do not know whether you are going to it. Now you may ask me, how the hell are you saying this, Mr. Shivaraman? I will give you a concrete example. The concrete example is the opium dump which India had, of which the Revenue Secretary was in charge. Only one country in the world is allowed to grow opium, that is India. Real opium is being grown by India under the permission given by the United Nations and under license. Every license to cultivate an opium field is produced by the Revenue Department of India. The Revenue Department issues a license to every farmer. Now, this has been going on since the British days. So in Neemuch, you have Neemuch, I was a collector of the district also, for your information. There is a huge well, huge tank. And into the tank used to be poured the opium. And that opium is to be, and we kept on adding. This year, 25,000 tons. Previous year, 18,000 tons. Third year, 27,000 tons. So much of money has been sold to, there is a company in the United States and company, they are monopoly procurers for this opium. They'll come and buy, and then the balance is to be shown. Now, one day I was sitting and thinking, I said, what the hell, 100 years nobody has taken a stock of this opium. So I decided, no, in future, I'm not going to do this thing. Let me empty the entire tank. And I put senior officers there. In their presence, the tank was washed and emptied. In the meanwhile, I asked the Institute of Packaging in Bombay, I want a pilfer-proof, steel-proof fiberglass canister, which will be taken to the field, electronic weighing machines or a sensitive weighing machine. The farmer puts the opium in there, it is full, it is sealed. 50 kg of opium, it is completely sealed. Then we will wait and see, and exactly this happened. So we found, you know what was the shortage? 25,000 tons was the shortage of opium. Now 25,000 tons of shortage of opium in today's parlance will run into billions of dollars. So when I put up that note to Manmohan Singh, I'm writing this letter to the United Nations, he was shocked. How are you going to reply? I said, sir, I'm being truthful. This is the shortage over 100 years. It might have gone into the hands of people. People would have died consuming heroin, opium, whatever it is, I don't know. But we have to stop this one day or the other. But the United Nations sent a letter of admiration to us that you had the courage to state like this. Now, will this government or any other government will have the courage to empty the godowns and check how much of the food grain that are really stored in there? So this is the problem in Punjab. And why is it in Chennai and Tamil Nadu people are not selling in the MSP center? Because they have immense problem carrying it there, doing it there, because so they find it convenient. As far as the Tamil Nadu farmers are concerned, I know some farmers, they are very happy. They said, sir, earlier we could not sell our food grains to Kerala. Now they are coming in droves and numbers and purchasing food grains from us. We are very happy with that. So many states are very happy with this liberalization. And one more point, not being political again, although it looks political, 2019 December, Mr. Amarendra Singh, whom I had known personally, I had dinner and lunches with him in his palace. A very fine man, I would say. He proposed a bill in the Punjab Assembly. Go through that bill, compare it clause by clause with the Government of India Act. You will find that is 10 times more liberal. Not even one member of parliament has dared to point out that this bill is pending in the Punjab Assembly. So these are the issues.
So, in short, I would like to ask you, how do you think the government can reduce the fiscal
Ashok,
deficit? It seems
Ashok,
an
can we
impossible
give
task.
somebody else a chance?
Yeah, sure,
Ashok?
sure, sure. Sure.
We come for the second round.
Yeah.
One question. First, we'll have Mr. K.T. Jagannathan is there, and he is expert in banking. He has written an article also in the Wire today. Mr. Jagannathan, would you like to pose a question?
There's one small thing from I consider myself a layman. I'm just asking. So the GDP has slashed last year, and the fiscal deficit is 9% or something like that. When you say 9% on the GDP, has there been an absolute increase in the numbers of spend? What a common man will make? There is a GDP slash, say, like from 100 rupees, if it is 20 rupees, and on the 20 rupees, there is a deficit of 9%. I mean, I don't understand what is that. So that's one.
The estimated GDP for 2021 has been done by the CSO, estimated GDP. It is under GDP, the actual expenditure that will be incurred by 31st March is almost known, because by November, December, all the expenditure incurred, it is on a real-time basis. Every department that is incurring expenditure on a real-time basis, the financial controller of that particular ministry will be having the figures month after month. Every month they prepare the accounts of the Government of India, the controller of accounts. There is a controller general of accounts of also the Government of India, who keeps track of all the expenditure. So by the time the January is there, they would know exactly what is likely to be the expenditure. Now that expenditure over the estimated GDP is what they have given as this thing. It may vary a little bit here and there, as you would have noticed. The actual GDP, the fiscal deficit may be 0.1% or 0.02%, like that it may vary. Now coming to the question of the fiscal deficit, if you look at the budget details, you will find huge amounts were spent on this food grain supply. I think about 3 lakh crores were spent only on food grain. Similarly, spent about huge amount on fertilizer subsidy, also huge amount had gone. Now, one of the reasons they say is some of these subsidies were being hidden, not in the budget, but in the company's accounts, which were giving the fertilizer by doing bank borrowing, which is known as quasi-fiscal deficit. Now, quasi-fiscal deficit never got reflected in government deficit because Food Corporation of India borrows money. Food Corporation of India supplies the food grains at the subsidized prices. Food Corporation of India is not given the full subsidy which it has to be given. So there is a rollover. That is why you will find the Reserve Bank of India bulletin that there is food credit and non-food credit. Food credit is a huge amount, and food credit is a kind of indirect financing to the government because the Food Corporation of India is sitting on all the debt. So Mrs. Sitaraman has stated now, from this year onwards, we are not going to hide that thing. We are going to bring it back into the government account, which is a good thing. So actually speaking, the fiscal deficit is measured only on the basis of the figures of expenditure that has come to the government at the end of this year and estimated till the end of March, and the estimated GDP.
So one small clarification in that. So when you say when Nirmala Sitharaman is saying that we spend something like that. But we have spent something like that. She was saying that more because of the crisis period, we spend more, you know.
Yeah.
But when we calculate all these, when we surmise all these, from one end transferred, is there a spending or just window dressing to show that?
No, they are spending. Otherwise, for example, for about 80 crore people, they said that they are given free food grain. That is a food grain outgo. That food grain outgo has to be ultimately adjusted against the Government of India account only. They have to make the payment. It is all free. So the Government of India has to make the payment of the FCI, which will have to return the money to the bank from where they have borrowed the money for purchase of this under the MSP. That is an actual outgo. Similarly, fertilizer. In the case of fertilizer is being sold at a subsidized rate, and that money has also gone to the fertilizer companies. Some of them may be outstanding. I'm not saying that it is fully paid. There may be outstanding, but they will be taking into account what is the likely liability on the government on account of this fertilizer outgo. So all these things will be there. I'm not saying that it will be 100% accurate. There may be a few thousands here and there.
For the next question, does anyone would like to, does Mr. Mohan have the next question for Mr. Sivaraman? He had another question. Mr. Mohan, please unmute before you ask. Thank you.
Sir, this year there is a proposal to withdraw the exemption of interest on Provident Fund and recognized Provident Fund on investments exceeding 2,50,000 rupees for employees. I think on the one hand, we are looking at savings. I think I don't really know why this kind of.
No, she explained it very clearly. She explained it very clearly. That I must give credit to her. A lot of people are using this as a route for making money on it. Because some companies which are getting huge salaries, 2 crore, 3 crore, 50 lakhs, 40 lakhs salary, they are just putting 20 lakhs in this. And she also gave the example of one particular or 1 or 2 instances where 1 crore was being put in it every month. So she wanted to stop it. And so she has restricted it to 2.5 lakh, which is reasonable. I must say.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Ashok, you have a question?
Yeah. So every year the senior citizens expect some kind of a relief from the budget, and again this year's whatever the finance minister has given seems to be an illusion, because she says that people above 75 need not file the income tax returns, but the punchline underneath is that the banks will deduct the tax on whatever income they are earning. So it's only an administrative procedure that is being waived for the benefit of the older people. Now there are so many agencies which are helping older people to do these things. So it's not a great relief that she has given. Actually, what the government could have done is raise the rates on term deposits so that the income, so that it becomes, because the tax rates or the interest rates are so low that a man who has retired can hardly earn anything and sustain himself with the kind of inflation that is going around.
No, you are absolutely right. This is only window dressing. It's not going to give any benefit to anybody, because unless you have the bank account and the pension in the same branch, bank branch, this benefit is not going to accrue to you. I'm not going to withdraw my deposits in one A bank, whereas the government has compelled me to take my pension through B bank. So I'll have to transfer all my deposits to the A bank, B bank. Then only I'll be able to get this benefit. So this is going to be a total failure. Now, if I had been in the ministry, and if I had been proposing, which I used to do a lot to Manmohan Singh, and he used to accept, we were on the same plane, because Manmohan Singh I had known when he was secretary, and I was joint secretary with Manmohan Singh. We were colleagues that way. So what would I have suggested? I would have suggested that all the people who are above 75 years of age will get an Ayushman card. And you can go to any hospital like every other beneficiary below poverty line who are getting the facilities which are very helpful to them. All people above 75 will get this. There is no harm. The government is not going to spend a lot of money. Mukesh Ambani's father, Dhirubhai Ambani, is not going to take this card and go and stand in a queue. So it's going to be people who just want to use it. I would have used it. Any other government servant have used it, because today I don't get any facilities from the CGHS. Some remarkable changes could have been brought about, which was not brought in. Second, I spoke, I think, in Srinivasan's earlier this thing interview, and I had also written that today a cancer patient has to pay a custom duty on life-saving drug which he has to import. 15% is a custom duty. In 1995, I had exempted, I had given it 0 rate of duty. Life-saving drugs, life-saving equipment for the hospitals, I had given 0 rate of duty with no conditions attached. But that was all withdrawn after I left the country. 100 doctors came to me and they praised me. He said, we want to garland you for what you have done, because you're great. But after I left, it was withdrawn. Today, the rate of custom duty on cancer drugs is 15%. Then there is a clause which says it will be custom duty free, provided you get a certificate from your doctor, provided you go to the assistant commission, fill up a form. Then the person who is supplying from London or United States He has to give a certificate, I am supplying this drug to you. Then it comes by plane. By the time the patient is dead. And this is what I wrote. Indian Express published it in a lead article about a month ago. Centerpiece it had come. Please care for these people. No, she had not bothered about it. Because the problem with this government or with any other government is when good suggestions are made, even officers like me say, oh, who is he to make the suggestion? We don't care a damn about it. This is what has happened.
Sir, Susan, permit me to ask a supplemental question.
Although I see the finance minister smiling behind Srinivasan.
She's smiling. It's an old photograph. She has white hair now.
I want to have a one-to-one with her. I want to have a one-to-one with her. Over a public platform, I am prepared to go one-to-one debate with her.
Sir, one supplemental question to your thing.
To be unfair to her.
Yeah, sir.
Because I spent 15 years in finance, 25 years in finance.
Sir, in view of the background of COVID and the kind of problems it created for a lot of people, don't you think the CGHS is highly restricted to government, and then even the government servants, as you said, are not getting proper benefits from it? I am willing to pay 10% from my income flat. Every citizen in this country is willing to pay 10% or 15% flat from his income for a social welfare scheme. And can we go for a national health scheme like London or Canada or Australia?
Of course, Mr. Ashok. You must read the Reddy Commission's report. Dr. Reddy, who is a famous cardiologist in Delhi, is a very well-known person. There is I forget his name, Reddy Commission's report on the National Health Mission. Reddy has stated amend the constitution and bring health under the control of the government of India and introduce a national health scheme like in France, like in United Kingdom, everywhere. And you take money from people who can afford to pay. People will completely make a national. Now, this Ayushman Bharat is somewhat like that scheme, and I think it is doing well and up to BPL people. And in my opinion, CGHS should be scrapped, and it should be given to the Ayushman card should be given to the government servants, and tell them every month from the pension you pay 500 rupees or something towards this card. You go to any hospital and take that. That also I wrote to the finance minister. She didn't look at it. She has no time. See, the problem is I have also worked under the BJP government. And I know a lot of BJP people, including Vajpayee, had known me personally because I was collector in Madhya Pradesh, from where the leaders of BJP came. Mandsaur district produced leaders like Virendra Kumar Sakleta, Kushabha Thakre, and all these people. Their problem is they will listen to you very nicely, they will treat you, but that brain will go only in one direction. That is the problem.
Thank you, Mr. Sivaraman.
Jaganathan, I think.
Incidentally, Mr.
KT Jaganathan.
Yes. Mr. T.S. Krishnamurthy had joined, but I had some problem and he's disconnected again. I hope he is able to join us again. Yeah, now maybe Jaganathan will have a question, please.
Sir, I'm just wondering the move to sell a couple of private banks, very correctly. The other thing is that they are selling the general insurance also. They are you able to listen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Proceed.
And the IPO for LIC. The point what I'm asking, is that the going to solve the problems of the banking sector? Because my own view is that it's the interference by the government. The autonomy for the management is not there, and then interference, the discretion, discretion. All these are making the public sector banks a lot more bad one. And the alternative, as I kept saying that, like yes, bank, then ICICI Bank, it's in Chanda, such a house we fallen from grace. What do we make of that? On the one hand, we want to privatize it.
What can be said on both sides, Mr. Jagannath? See, banks have been failing in droves in the United States, but still they fail in droves in the United States. Private sector banks in India have also done very badly. The Global Trust Bank or whatever it is in the previous period also, they collapsed. So much can be said on both sides. In my opinion, if the government keeps away from the running of these banks and allow professionals to run it, and only supervise in the sense that they are not making it their personal affair, then these banks can run efficiently. Now, take for example, Engineers India Limited. It's a public sector concern. It's a diamond concern. It is doing a marvelous job because government cannot interfere. They know nothing about designing a power station or designing a major project the government cannot interfere. So therefore, that is doing very well. If you look at other organizations which are doing very well, government does not interfere in those areas. So in the case of banks, because of constant erosion of the responsibility and authority of the bankers by saying, "Arey yaar, hamara admi hai, please give loan to him." I know him, yaar. Yesterday I was with a banker in one of the nationalized banks. The manager is getting a telephone from one of his officers. I mean, I'm narrating it to you. He said, "Only 5 lakhs, why don't you give it?" He said, "Sir, I can't do it because there is no succession certificate. There is no nomination." Have you heard this is not necessary? Somebody gives a. He said, "No, this is the kind of influence. I have resigned from one company because there was interference from a very high level in Government of India in regard to evergreening of a particular loan. I resigned from that company." So there is constant interference. Mr. Jagannathan is absolutely right. But if they are privatized, will they work better? I can't say. Because many of the private sector banks have also failed. They have looted the public. So it is a question of supervision. It is supervision and giving autonomy. These are the two key words as far as banking sector is concerned, or any other sector for that matter.
Is there any other question before?
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Ashok, please.
Sir, in this context of no interference in the banks, do you think with the kind of mounting NPAs and the government has taken a decision to appoint a bad bank, it's been a diversified opinion on whether it's good or bad. What is your opinion? Is the bad bank a good idea or a bad idea?
See, always to have such an institution is a moral hazard. Because when once you set up as an institution where bad banks can be thrown into the garbage bin, the garbage bin is the ARC. There is already an ARC being run by some of these banks. Already there is an ARC. Why another ARC is coming up, I do not know. There are total number of ARCs in the country is 28. I was the first chairman or the first ARC set up in this country in the private sector. It ran well for 1 year. In the first year, I am being open on this. First year, it earned a profit. Then the persons who financed that sector, I don't want to mention the name, they said, "You please do this, please do that. You remove this director." They were all wonderful people, brilliant people, men of integrity. I refused. Then they even tempted me. "We'll give you 5 crores. Please ask them to resign." I said, "No, I resign." And I informed the Reserve Bank of India. For 3 years that the ARC was not allowed to function. They are again functioning. Including them, there are 28 ARCs functioning in this country. Some of them are foreign funded. Why should there be one more ARC? What is the purpose of having one more ARC? These ARCs are functioning only for the bank NPAs. So I'm not able to understand at all this kind of budget announcement.
So they say it is very thinly capitalized, sir.
Huh?
They say these are very thinly capitalized. That is why we want a highly capitalized bad bank.
But thinly capitalized is not a good reason. There are so many ARCs which are functioning. They are all taking, every year there is an auction for the NPAs from the banks. Every month, I think they advertise in the papers. The ARCs go and bid for it. Even suppose, for example, an ARC is set up with 500 crores. Is it going to be any better? Why can't you, the ARC which is functioning under the aegis of some of these banks, which are already there, one is there or two are there, that can be strengthened. Why should you set up one more ARC? I mean, this proliferation of government institution is the bane of the day. If you look at the statistics, I think Mr. Jagannathan, being a very, very prominent editor of a very big newspaper, I used to contribute to Business World for a long time. If you go into statistics and find out how many hundreds of public sector undertakings are there in the state governments, read the finance commission reports. Every 5 years, you will find all of them are running into losses. They are all set up for people to become chairman. MLAs who can't be made ministers, they become chairman there. So It cuts both ways. I am not a person who would like to sell the IOC. I am not a person who will sell the ONGC. I will stand in the way of the government selling even the State Bank of India or, for instance, ONGC or IOC. I used to tell Manmohan Singh, we must have some golden companies in the hands. BSNL should have been protected. BSNL should have been made very modern and technically good, so that it's a strategic industry for India. There must be suppose tomorrow everything fails, BSNL is always there. BSNL can be closed operation during a war or something. But you never allowed the BSNL to function properly. Even today, you are not giving them 4G. You are making them fail. I don't know what, I mean, this policy has been prevailing from UPA days. And during Manmohan Singh's time, L&T was about to be swallowed by one private company.
Reliance.
I won't mention the name. So the L&T chairman came to me, I knew him very well. He said, Shivaraman, I've come with folded hands. This company is being run by your own public sector undertaking. LIC is having the share, banks are having the share, private shareholding is very limited. Please save us. Then we saved them.
Sir, again, on the extension of your experience, whatever you are mentioning, the ARC, now even in the insurance FDI increasing, and they say we will protect the, make it Indianized with the Indian management, and 50% of the board will be independent directors. But I don't know how independent directors are, how independent they are of the political bosses or even for their own, whoever has appointed them. This is a problem even in the private sector, I feel it, sir. How that could be.
Jagannathan,
Even sir, Mr. Mohan also is an independent director now.
I would like to interfere and tell my experience. I think, sir, I think there was since it relates to taxation also, in the public sector, I was there, I think normally they would have paid, let us say, 1,000 crore. But the government demanded 2,500 crore advance tax. It was to be approved by the audit committee. I stood my ground and I said that you are looking at previous record, I don't find 2,500 crore advance taxes. No, sir, so and so is putting a pressure on us. I said, I think it is for you to, at least I will dissent from this and I will record my dissent in the audit committee. Fortunately, the chairman of the company was so good.
There is a general rule, that is the problem. Everybody is independent.
No, sir, I think that the chairman called me after the committee was over. Sir, I will, whatever pressure, I will go to the revenue secretary and tell him also that our audit committee chairman has not accepted. And he said, I will at the best, instead of 1,000 crore, 1,500 crore I will pay. But as you rightly pointed out, the independent directors can, to some extent only, we can resist. After that, I think we can't do it.
okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, on this point raised by Mohan, you know what it is called in the revenue department?
What's
It
it
is
called?
called it is called Geeta Krishnan effect.
Oh, God.
Geeta Krishnan,
Understand.
Geeta Krishnan was my predecessor revenue secretary.
Yes, sir.
When I joined as revenue secretary, when the June figures came of collection of income tax and corporation tax, I found it was negative. M.R. Sivaraman, chosen as a professional, as a revenue secretary after 15-20 years of experience in finance and economics, he finds himself in mid-sea minus 240 crores. The income tax and corporation tax government had paid out of the kitty. Then we started looking in. Mr. Mohan come, there was some other Mohan at the time. ONGC had deposited 2,000 crores, IOC has deposited 5,000 crores, LIC has deposited, all that money were withdrawn by them. Because the promises given by Geeta Krishnan, you can withdraw it afterwards, everything was given back. So there was negative. That was stopped by me. I said, nobody will compel any company to pay taxes more than what is they consider it as the due. If they are doing it, it is wrong. Now, independent directors, I think Mr. Jagannathan raised the issue. Independent directors are independent only to the extent they are independent in their conscience.
Yeah, that's true.
Otherwise, the independent directors is a sham.
Absolutely correct.
Sham, and it is a scam. Now, in the ILF, Mr. Bhargav, R.C. Bhargav is a director. He is now being under prosecution with the ILF scandal. I think he's all, because the paper same, he will also be prosecuted. Because there was fiduciary.
It's 17 hours.
Fiduciary responsibility. Because Mr. R.C. Bhargav is a big man. a wonderful person. He was made a member of the ILFS and he simply signed papers. So, and in many of the private sector companies, the independent directors are chosen by the promoters. All the
Exactly.
friends of promoters, brother-in-law, nephew, sister-in-law. These are the people who come. How much are they independent? Now take, for example, Air India. In the time of Mr. Manmohan Singh or in the previous times also, Air India had a board which consists of Ratan Tata, which consists of Keshav Mahindra, which consists of the joint Hong Kong. But what happened to the Air India? It is at the bottom of the sea instead of flying in the air.
True.
On that note, I think it is time to wind up. We've crossed over an hour. It's been a fruitful, very intensive question answer session and explanations given by Mr. Sivaraman. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Incidentally, Mr. T.S.
Thank you, sir.
Krishnamurthy had come on board, but he had some technical issues. He was with us for about 5 minutes, but he got disconnected. It is unfortunate.
But
Mr.
TSK would have
Sri-
answered a number of questions.
Yes. Mr. Srinivasan, would you like to take over now?
Okay, sir, finally, before closing it, I would like to request Mr. Shivaraman sir, how much mark you will give 0 to 100 scale for the present budget?
For
1 to
the
10 you should say.
5 marks.
Huh?
5.
5, 0.
0 to 100 scale,
0 to 100.
0 to 100.
1 to 10. He's saying 1 to 10.
0 to 100 scale, how much mark you will give for to this budget?
50%.
50%. Okay.
Fast, budget fast.
Budget is fast.
When compared to the previous year's budget,
No, these budgets have been uniform, you know. These budgets presented by this government, I have not gone into the macroeconomic issues.
okay.
Should have been there. For example, Human Development Index of India has come down from 131 to 129. Bangladesh is above us. In longevity, Bangladesh is 72 years. India is still 69. So what is the performance? Previous 6 years of before 2014, rate of economic growth was 8%. After that, 2014 to 2020, rate of economic growth has come to 6.5%. 13 lakh crores are gone as DBT. That is what Smriti Irani claimed yesterday. Where has this money gone? Why is the longevity not gone up? If 8 crore people are using gas, there will be a lot of lives saved. Diarrhea would have gone if every village has become defecation free. So there is something wrong with the statistics or the way in the compilation has taken place of HDI, or there is something wrong with the government. So somewhere something has gone wrong. Otherwise, why would have gone regressed in the Human Development Index, where Mr. Modi has taken personal pains of making the country defecation free, where Modi has given 8 crore gas connections free. Why has it not happened? Somebody has to look at it. Or the calculation of HDA is wrong. Then I found in the economic survey that the retention of students up to 10th class is very high in many of the states. That is one of the factors which go into the computation of HDI. Then why are they not questioning the HDI? What is the chief economic advisor, Mr. Krishnamurthy, is doing? He should contest. Then the HDI is wrong. Are we more backward than Bangladesh? I've gone to Bangladesh several times. I was the ambassador of Bangladesh in the International Monetary Fund also. I have met with the Prime Minister of Bangladesh 2-3 times. Bangladesh is no better than India, but the Human Development Index shows that they are better than India. They are performing better than India. Then what is wrong? Continuously there are agitations in Bangladesh. And agitation in Bangladesh is really frightening. I was there once, 15 days I spent in Dhaka. There was an agitation once. I was really got nervous when I saw the crowd. So why is it happening? Why is Mr. Krishnamurthy not questioning it? He should not be singing the saga of the government. He should try to find out why my HDI is so low, in spite of the Modi Sarkar doing so much for the people. Thousands of crores of cash has gone into the hands of farmers. Why are the farmers protesting in spite of 75,000 crores or 80,000 crores of cash they got? Cash. So there is something wrong somewhere in the system.
So one last question before conclusion, that the government, the budget, they are providing a lot of money to the infrastructure, crores and crores. Will it boost the economy? Because with that we will close the discussion.
See, the amount of money, as I told you, 1 lakh crores is extra over the last year for purpose of spending on infrastructure in the current year and the next year. Now, road work is going on extremely well under Mr. Gadkari. There is no doubt about it. And if these road works get completed, naturally there will be a coverage by road network, all the economically important portions of the country, which should lead to a substantial amount of development. Now, one of the reasons why this is not happening is my personal view is why the growth is not spurting now is because the migrant workers who are there in 15 million in this country who have gone away from there, they are still hesitating to go back in numbers. The budget, unfortunately, did not contain any provision for securing their interests. Although she has given some money here and there, I had written, and I think I spoke to you also. I spoke in your interview also.
Yes.
But there must be unemployment insurance to the migrant workers. First 2 years, the government should contribute. The remaining 2, after 2 years, the people who employ the migrant workers. Now, the system which has been enforced since 1979 must be rigorously enforced. Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman should have said this. She would have earned undying praise from people. Because if you safeguard the interests of 15 million workers strewn all over the country in important working sites, in important industrial enterprises, small and medium enterprises, the country will go forward. Why did they neglect this? Why hasn't a single MP raised this issue? Rahul Gandhi is jumping around like a, what shall I say, Kathputli. But why is he not raising this issue in the parliament? I knew his father very well. He was a good friend of mine. Because he used to come to the flying club very often. After he ceased to be Prime Minister, Shivaraman, will you allow me to fly this aircraft? No, you are an ex-Prime Minister. I will not allow you. He was a very nice man. Rahul Gandhi, why didn't he ask this question? What happened to the Central Labour Commissioner? Why is he taking a salary? Why was he not asked? Where is the data? The data should have been available with every joint labour commissioner in charge of migrant labour. Only Kerala had the proper data. They didn't have anything. They have not registered anybody. Or even if they have registered, they did not properly look into it. The law says that anybody employing the migrant worker is responsible for his medical facilities, residence, and for his transportation from the place of work to his residence in the state from which he is coming. Government need not have paid this railway fares, etc. That was the responsibility of the person who employed them as a migrant labor. Please go through the law. Susan Koshi, please go through the law. 1979 Act.
Yes, sir, I did. I did when we were doing the article.
You did it. And see what has happened. Where has anybody mentioned? Nobody has mentioned. I think I would request Mr. Jagannathan and Mr. Ashok to raise this issue in the press. Why are the MPs not agitated about the non-implementation of 1979 Act?
Mr. Srinivasan?
So thank you very much, sir, for the wonderful evening and sharing your very valuable thoughts and information. And really, it is more useful. I also thank all the invited guests, experts who have joined us in this discussion. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank everybody for this interaction. I've been very vocal.
It's
Being
good.
vocal, I'm also vocal.
For that, sir.